Please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Metu Neter, Volume 1 by Ra-Un Amen Nafer. Chapter 13, Level 1, First 3 stages of the meditation process. Care of the life force. As the raising of our consciousness to the higher parts of the spirit and the achievement of our will cannot take place without a strong life force, care of the life force is the most important preliminary requirement to success in life and meditation. It is this force that is the energetic and substantive basis from which our physical bodies and higher parts of our spirit are made. It is also the basis of our metaphysical faculties that we call deities. These are the spiritual complexes that are in charge of the operation of the host of physiological and mental functions. Het Heru, for example, is in charge of the gonadal, gestational, artistic, imaginative functions, and so on. Sebek is in charge of the cerebrospinal, verbalizing, sequential logical functions, and so on. It is for this reason that the life force was called by the Khemeticians Ra, the father of the gods and of all living things. It is not the sun god. It is the solar force, which is the substantive and energetic basis of all things on earth. While the Khemeticians knew this fact over 6,000 years ago, Western scientists have just recognized it in the past 100 years. The observances that must be upheld to keep our life force strong involve proper diet, conservation, moderation in our activities, mental and physical work, sex, eating, etc., and living in harmony with the cycles and modalities of this life force. The 4 principles underlying the process of meditation. The fundamental principles of meditation. 1. Level 1 of meditation, which is carried out in 3 stages, spheres 9 to 7, aims at A. Positioning the self, the inner guiding intelligence of our being, as the performer of the meditation and the undertaking in place of our person. It is important to realize that our person is a limited, conditioned, and defined entity. It is composed of a portfolio of capabilities, incapabilities, central and emotional orientations. As such, it is not capable of functioning outside of its portfolio. A martial personality cannot achieve a goal that requires mercurial or Venusian talents. But our self, the indwelling intelligence guiding all of our spiritual subconscious and physiological activities can. It must be realized that we are not merely positioning ourselves as the executor of the meditation. Ultimately, all meditations have as their purpose the realization of our true self Asar, the inner guiding intelligence as our identity. It is this that is meant by the archaic phrases achieving spiritual liberation, attaining to nirvana. Yoga is the union of the self, they mean person, with God, and so on. These nominal definitions, however, do not work for the student. What are needed are procedural definitions. To wit, meditation has as its purpose the uniting, yoga, of the will of the individual, Heru, with the indwelling intelligence, Asar, or self, which is responsible for directing and unifying all physiological and spiritual functions. This union enables the individual's conscious needs, what is willed, for health, wealth, security, marital success, wisdom, etc., to be accepted and carried out by the indwelling intelligence. This inner intelligence is always ready to do so, but the union between it and the personal will is interfered with, in most cases by the set of disunited, conflicting, and contradictory ideas, the person, set, that makes up the belief systems guiding the actions of people. 2. Level 2 of meditation, which is carried out in 3 stages, spheres 6 to 4, corresponds to the exertion of our will to establish the domination of the law of God cosmology, Mat Tahuti, over our thinking, feelings, and actions. It is the living of this law that gives substance to our identification with Asar as ourself. What are the laws or shaping forces that govern your personality? Are they not a set of I can do so and so, I can't do so and so, I like or don't like so and so, hence I don't or don't, and so on. What would happen if the indwelling intelligence running your body functioned in such a matter? Well, today I don't feel like directing the manufacturing of blood sugar, and I will not detoxify the body. I don't like doing that kind of work. It is so repugnant, etc. Shall we not thank God that it functions according to divine law? Yet, what it does for your body and subconscious mental activities, it can do for your marriage, career, etc. But it is not a simple process of imagining what you want with a strong desire. You must identify yourself as the indwelling intelligence, which is to think, feel, and live according to divine law, Mat and Tahuti. 3. Level 3 of meditation, which is carried out in 3 stages, spheres 3 to 1, corresponds to the ability to utilize the divine powers and omniscience of the Spirit as a result of having established the law of God as the guide for living. It is important to distinguish these powers from those obtained through the occult, subtle physics, use of herbs, gems, blood, and so on. While the latter functions through the lower part of the spirit, requiring no spiritual transformation in the practitioner, the powers of the higher parts of the spirit, spheres 1 to 3, work primarily through divine law and words of power. 4. Level 4 of meditation corresponds to the realization that as our self is inseparable from God and shares in the same qualities of God, it is God that is ultimately responsible for all of the good things in our lives. The 10 stages of the meditation process. We will illustrate the meditation process with 2 scenarios. In the first, we have a woman who is having difficulties with her reproductive organs and as a result cannot become pregnant. All medications, allopathic, homeopathic, acupuncture, etc. have failed. She consulted the oracle in the latter part of this book and was told that Het Heru, the Venusian deity, will help her. The reason for this reading is that she has been too quote-unquote hot in her daily activities. The fire generated by the intensity with which she carries out her job, she is a boss lady, and the sharpness with which she deals with her subordinates are taking a toll on a reproductive system that was already congenitally weak and harmed by earlier abortions. In the second scenario, we have a man who was told by the oracles that his career will be advanced by Mat. He came to the diviner house because he could not understand how and why his acquaintances with significantly less talent were steadily making progress, while he was stagnating, in spite of well-planned and calculated career moves. Mat's prosperity-generating force was choked off in his life because he failed to share with others. He was always too busy trying to make a buck and would not make time to give some of his skills to his community. Although he was a devout churchgoer, his constant worrying over his financial situation betrayed that he had no understanding of or faith in the laws of God. Let's call our woman Nefrat and our man Sihu. They will achieve their goals through the series of meditations. Although the methods, chanting of Hekau, breathing, etc., that they will employ are efficacious, their success will depend on their ability to carry out the instructions. Level 1 of the meditation process, Stage 1, Sphere 9. The first meditation aims at positioning Asar as the executor of the meditation. Nefert Ra and Sihu will go into mediumistic trance, chanting the Heka Ong Asar Hung, see chapter 24, while visualizing themselves wearing the white crown of Asar. Before performing this meditation, they would have thoroughly studied the metaphorine of Asar and the meaning of Asar as the indwelling intelligence that is guiding all of their spiritual or subconscious and physiological functions. All of this information is to be equated with the white crown of Asar. As a result, the act of visualizing ourselves wearing this crown symbolizes our identification of ourselves as the embodiment of the ideas associated with Asar. But more importantly, it enables us to express this act of identification without verbal thinking, left side of the brain activity, which resists the internalization of consciousness. That is to say, it enables us to think with the right hemisphere of the brain, which is in charge of the internalization of consciousness. This is the meaning of the Khemetic teaching to the effect that what the House of Neter, or Supreme Being, dislikes is much talking. Pray thou with a loving heart, the utterances of which are all in secret. The talking during prayer, meditation, is the verbalization of our thoughts. The praying, which is uttered in secret, is conducted through the graphic representation of our thoughts. This can be proven by comparing the attempts to meditate with verbalized thoughts in comparison to using imagery. The fact that mental chattering is inimical to meditation and the visualization aids it is well known to seasoned practitioners of meditation. Another important reason for bypassing the left side of the brain resides in the fact that it is the seat of our segregative or disintegrative thinking and behavior. It is dominated by Set, the evil principle within us. It is the origin of the thoughts that delude us. It is important to realize that the scope of this meditation is limited to initiating the process of identification of the individual with the self. The realization of this identity and the struggles to establish it make up the theme of level 2 of the meditation process. It is also important not to equate the process of this stage of meditation with Western hypnosis. The individual is not being hypnotized into accepting the idea that his true self is Asar. We must always keep in mind that Asar is not an idea but an actual entity. Footnote. This is why I coined the term metaphorian in place of myth and allegory. End of footnote. It is the inner intelligence within our being to which we are returning our identity. The closest that this meditation comes to hypnosis will be seen in those cases in which a person's ability to perform a particular task at a certain level is restored through hypnotherapy. The person is led to identify with his original capabilities in place of the faulty performance that has replaced the former. It is not uncommon for athletes and artists to restore their confidence or bring out their full potential through hypnotherapy. The major differences between the method employed here versus hypnotherapy reside in the fact that here the individual is identifying with the indwelling intelligence as his self, whereas in Western hypnotherapy he maintains the person, the lower part of being, as his identity. While our method avails itself of the omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence of the inner intelligence of our being, Western hypnotherapy confines the individual to the limitations of the personality. We must remember that our persons are defined entities. Some are martial, others lunar, others mercurial, and so on. Each represents a set of capabilities and limitations. The second meditation that must be done in this stage involves chanting the Heka, Ong, Asar, Hung, while visualizing your person wearing the white crown of Asar as you plant a grain of cereal, corn or barley, etc. See it grow into a tree full of ears of grain. This is a right side of the brain way of expressing 1. Your understanding that your self-indwelling intelligence is the source of all prosperity and sustenance in your life. 2. It also states that from one comes many. This is to remind you that Asar, yourself, is the one and only self dwelling in all things. It is also symbolical of the fact that all of people's problems stem from their failure to identify with their true self. They thus invent millions of false causes for man's problems and, of course, millions of like solutions. While Sihu has been blaming his lack of advancement on the inabilities of others to appreciate his true worth, Nefert Ra has been oppressing herself with the belief that life is just not fair. Why me? She asked herself over and over again. The truth is that all problems stem from the lack of knowledge of self, or that the true self is the indwelling intelligence. Once this is known and taken as a base from which to build our thinking, feeling, and action patterns, then we will avoid and solve all problems. That is, from one measure comes the solution to all problems. This unitary outlook on life is the true basis of monotheism. The next set of meditations of the first stage aims at breaking the indiscriminate imitation flaw of the ninth sphere. The third meditation at this stage involves chanting the Heka, Ong Vang Du Hung. See chapter 24. Once you are in trance, seek to recall one of the earliest times in which you manifested a particular emotional or sensual behavior. You will always discover that their earliest manifestations occurred when you were a child. Make the attempt to relive, just not remember the situation, and you will notice that you expressed such behavior because you had no other option. You lacked the experience and the intellectual maturity to react rationally and philosophically to the situation, so you had no choice but to follow the emotions that reflected themselves in your awareness. You must therefore proceed to 1. Meditate on the fact that now that you are an adult, you now have ideas in place of emotions, through which to express yourself. 2. If you are going to continue this childlike behavior, you must make a commitment to go and seek counsel for your life's problems from a child. You must also take note of the fact that the emotional expressions of anger, sensual craving, fear, shyness, greed, jealousy, etc. are not only common to both man and animals, but are the primary mode of expression of the latter, while man has a superior intelligence through which to alter his behavior. We must ask ourselves then, during the trance state, how can we claim to be superior to animals if we allow our emotions and sensualism to direct our thoughts and actions? We must also identify each of these emotions, which originate in our animal spirit, the Khemetic, sphere 10, with one of the symbols of the Sesh Metu Neter. Western biologists have just recently discovered that the human brain is in reality a number of brains, some of which are the centers for the traits that we share with animals. This fact was known to Khemetic priests thousands of years ago. They communicated this information through their hieroglyphic constructions of human-headed animals and animal-headed humans, e.g. Anpu or Anubis, the jackal-headed man symbolizing the cunning and cleverness that man shares with the canine species, also with baboons and other apes. Footnote: hence the baboon that is sacred to Tahuti. It is in reality a symbol of the eighth sphere that has close association to the second. Yoruba initiates will understand this by analogies to the relationships of Elegba, the trickster, cunning Orisha to Ifa, the god of wisdom. End of footnote. The hawk, a trainable bird of prey, was used to symbolize the higher combative and destructive aspects of man's spirit. These are the deities Hiru, Hirukuri, Seker, etc. And uncontrolled sensualism, for example, was equated with the pig, a correspondence of the deity Set, which symbolizes the self-destructive nature of an unbridled strong sensual drive. It is founded on the fact that the pig is known for its greed, which does not stop at even eating its own piglets. One must meditate with the following aims. 1. To realize that to follow our emotions is to imitate the animal part of the spirit. Footnote: emotions and sensual pleasures, it must be understood, are to be allowed expressions only when they are in harmony with the truth. The truth, though, is to be arrived at either through auricular inquiries, meditations taken sometimes to the sixth stage, sphere 4, Mat, and at other times to the eighth stage, sphere 2, Tehuti. End of footnote. And 2. To detach our identity from our emotions. A major source of delusion and spiritual bondage comes from the belief that our emotions are expressions of ourself. People are in the habit of saying, "This is the way I feel. This is what I desire. I like so-and-so," etc. The tree of life, offers us a means of seeing the difference between ourself, which resides at Sphere 1 with its roots, and our emotions and sensual passions, which reside at Sphere 10. We can begin to break these false identifications by seeing our emotions and cravings for what they are, expressions of the animal part of our spirit, the Khemetic Sphere 10. The ultimate goal of our meditations is the return of our focus of consciousness to the unprogrammed and unconditioned part of our spirit. Again, I must remind the reader that these meditations are not to be conducted through verbal thinking. The information associated with each symbol of the Sesh Metu Neter, Appendix A, must be thoroughly studied, understood, and accurately amplified. While you are in a trance, you must see your person with the head or body of an animal, symbolizing your emotion or desire, indulging in an emotional situation. Jealous or hateful people might see themselves as serpents, filled with venom, ill will, waiting to ambush others. All negative emotions can be symbolized as worms eating away at one's vital force, or Ra. Sihu, whose emotional problem is one of selfishness, 8th sphere, will see himself as a canine, a jackal, or a dog. Have you noticed, for the most part, that dogs do not like to share their food? Nefert Ra will see herself on her job as the goddess Sekhmet, the lion-headed, destructive aspect of the sun's desert and barrenness-making power. Please note that the third meditation is subdivided into 4 components. The fourth meditation at this stage involves chanting the Heka Ong Vang Duhung. Once you are in a trance, seek to recall one of the earliest instances in which you imitated your present emotional expression from someone else. You will notice that in most cases, this took place when you were a child. Meditate with the aim of realizing that the emotion that you are presently harboring has its roots in the indiscriminate imitation of others. This is a form of age regression meditation, level 1 of the meditation process, stage 2, sphere 8. The first set of meditations aims at positioning Asar as the foundation of the reasons that we give ourselves for our beliefs, ways of feeling and acting, etc. People are in the habit of basing the rationalizations for their actions on their identification with their persons. In contrast to our indwelling intelligence, which is unconditioned, each person is the embodiment of a set of conditioned behavioral patterns. Fear, anger, sensitivities, shyness, failures, likes, dislikes, and other shaping factors of personalities serve to limit an individual's ability to achieve his goals, not just simply from the fact that emotions can make him act irrationally or paralyze his capacity for action, but more importantly from the fact that they can interfere with the activity of the indwelling intelligence. This is symbolized as the killing of Asar by Set. We must therefore realize that it is not a simple matter of thinking positively, which must in the long run fail as long as the individual continues to identify himself with his person, which is in essence limited in its capabilities. A positive thought cannot succeed if it is contradicted by an innate limitation of the personality. We must therefore identify with the free part of ourselves, the indwelling intelligence, in order for our positive thoughts to be successful. The chief meditation of this stage is suggested by the function of one of the deities of this sphere, Anpu, or Anubis. He is the embalmer of Asar and assists in his mummification. In the Sesh Metu Neter, embalming and mummification symbolize the incorruptibility of the higher parts of the spirit. The initiate who has elevated his consciousness to this level is beyond the decadent influences of earthly things, which are symbolized by worms. These earthly things, worms that corrupt us, are the earthborn ideas, the Sibao, that we hold about ourselves and life. As we saw, they originate in the left side of the brain, sphere 8 of Sahu Man. They are the emotion-based rationalizations that we give ourselves to justify indulging and following our emotions and sensualism. I am only human, so naturally I had to or couldn't, etc. I didn't live truth, but I am doing my spiritual work. To overcome this way of thinking, we must thoroughly study and understand the fact that our true self, or soul, is beyond the influence of emotions. No matter how often and how strongly they reflect themselves in our awareness, we can resist and ignore them. What would happen if you didn't respond as an emotion suggested? Make an honest and determined effort to ignore them the next 10 times that they visit you, and you will see that they really don't have any power over you. It is for this reason that emotions, Sibao, are called the children of impotent revolt in the Pert Imheru, Egyptian Book of the Dead. Most people are controlled by their emotions mainly because they believe that they must follow them, or because they believe that emotions are the validators and justifiers of their actions, as if emotions were signifiers of truth. Most people believe that they cannot do what they don't feel and must do what they feel. All of the ideas of the self's indwelling intelligences, imperviousness to emotions, and sensualism must be equated to the depiction of Asar as a mummy. Chant the Heka on Ain, see chapter 24, until you are deep in trance. Once in trance, recall a rationalization that you give yourself for indulging an emotion, while seeing yourself unmoved by it. Visualize yourself as the mummy Asar. Footnote: it is important to appreciate the fact that here the problem is verbalized, stated by the left side of the brain, and the solution is pictured, expressed by the right side of the brain. End of footnote. The objective is for you to get in the habit of reasoning that if you identify with your true self as opposed to your person, you can never use your emotions as justification for your actions. When we get to stage 4 of the meditation process, we will see how the rationalizing faculty, 8th sphere, Sebek, helps us to become impervious to temptations, i.e. how it embalms us or prevents moral decay. Nefert Ra must reject the belief that she cannot help getting upset by other people's lack of capability, as this fieriness is an intrinsic quality of her personality. Marshall, she cannot become a calm person by simply nourishing positive thoughts to the effect. She must identify with herself, Asar, which is able to manifest any behavior and personality that is required. We will have more to say on this in the third stage. Sihu's belief that his goal of achieving financial security can only be reached by devoting all of his time to his personal pursuits will be transcended by his realization that as his true self is the same self in others, what he does for others, he does for himself. His true self is not bound by time and energy limitations in the accomplishment of its goals. The indwelling intelligence directs thousands of physiological functions at the same time. By identifying with it as our true self, we are able to transcend the limitations of our persons. This identification is the opening of the way. Our rationalizations of what we can and can't do, which are the intrinsic limitations of our personalities, close the way to the working of our indwelling intelligence in the totality of our being. It limits the self to the task of directing the subconscious, mental, and bodily processes. To sum up, the objective of the meditation at this stage is the realization that as our true self is infinite in its potential to know and do, we must never accept any limiting thought regarding the things that we need to accomplish in life. We must always be ready to say, I can, with the understanding that this I is not the complex of capabilities, limitations, and inclinations that we call our personality, but the unconditioned, hence infinitely capable indwelling intelligence of our being, Asar. Level 1 of the meditation process, Stage 3, Sphere 7. Now that we have positioned the infinite potential part of our being, the indwelling intelligent as executor of the meditation, stage 1, and have brought our rationalizations of what we want in harmony with the self, stage 2, we are now ready to meditate on achieving the goal. A fundamental principle at work in this stage is based on the fact that our life force does not make distinctions between the actions that we visualize during trance and the same actions when they are carried out physically. Western scientists have objectively verified that the visualization of ourselves doing exercises while in a mild state of trance affects the same physiological responses as actual exercising. Many athletes and artists are currently improving their performances in this manner with the help of hypnotherapists. The spirit, or subconscious, does not distinguish between a successful performance, singing, playing tennis, typing, lecturing, having sex, etc., that is carried out in one's imagination during trance from one that is carried out physically. To wait for success in the physical performance of an act before you can feel confident of your abilities to succeed is backward and dangerous. In the mediumistic or sleep, hypnotic mode of trance, the animal spirit, with all of its conditioned resistances to change, is lulled to sleep. Footnote: this is the main reason for employing this type of trance during the first 3 stages of the meditation process. End of footnote. This enables us to carry out perfect performances in our imagination while in trance. On the other hand, we might hit or miss our objectives when we physically carry out our actions without such preparations. If an individual were to conduct 100 perfect lectures or golf swings in the entranced imagination as far as the spirit is concerned, the individual has, in actuality, perfectly performed these acts, even though they have never been done physically. When the time comes for these actions to be done physically, the spirit will guide the body to the flawless execution of the acts. This is due to the fact that the spirit, the subconscious, is the executor of all actions. We are just not simply speaking of some esoteric way of rehearsing. All behaviors and physical functions are controlled by matrices composed of subatomic energy matter. This energy matter is the substantial basis of our thoughts. We must realize that the sounds and images that are perceived as thoughts must be formed from some type of energy matter. It is this energy matter that we manipulate into images to direct and control not only our physiological and emotional behavior, but events in the social dimension of our lives, as well as the environment, as you will verify from your success in meditation. Assistance from the deities. Seek assistance from deity A, deity B will protect you, etc., are expressions that can only be placed in proper perspective through the tree of life. While our self is located at sphere 1 and is unconditioned and unqualified, personalities are located at sphere 9 and are conditioned by the set of qualities of the 10th sphere, where the 10th sphere, animal spirit Khemetic, emphasizes the fiery mode, Aries, Scorpio, Leo, etc. of the life force. The individual's Ka, personality, barring illness, etc., excels at fiery tasks and challenges. The person is zealous, enterprising, quick in deciding and acting, short-tempered, a leader through force of character, etc. But this heat, which makes this type of person successful when challenged to respond in a fiery, hot, dry manner, will be the cause of failure when challenged to meet a situation that requires the calm reflection and flexibility of the watery, cold, moist type of personality, or the persuasive and clever rhetorical skill of the earthly, cold, dry personality, or when challenged to a long, protracted fight that requires the blend of law and power of the airy, hot, moist personality type. Footnote: it is important to separate the Khemetic airy metaphor, which is the hot and moist principle, from the Chinese or Taoist air, which corresponds to the Khemetic earth. Similarly, the latter is not the same as the Chinese earth, which corresponds to the Khemetic ether, also known as Akasha, to use the Hindu term. End of footnote. Thus, we can understand the indivisible duality between the two components of our being. Hence, man is called an individual. The self, which is the constitutional component, and the person, which is the functional. This is to say that the constitution or law of our being, which is the self's infinite capacity of expression, is united at our birth to a finite functional complex, the personality. A fiery person, for example, will not find in his personality portfolio the means of genuinely, convincingly, consistently, and most importantly, satisfying to his nature, being calm and yielding in confrontations. Similarly, the watery person will be afflicted when called upon to be zealous, enterprising, and domineering. In the archaic mode of speaking, each person must seek assistance from the personality complex, the deity that governs the set of behavioral attributes that are outside of our natal personality. Since we are each born in intimate association with only one of these 7 personality types, the practice of invoking or evoking, calling out, the non-natal personalities seems to the spiritually immature as if beings external to ourselves were being called upon. Footnote. Note that the terms associated with bringing forth the deities, evocation and invocation, are based on the root voke, to call. It hints at the method of bringing out the inner powers. They are called or chanted out through the use of hekau, words of power, or mantras. End of footnote. We must clarify this point. Although all personalities are latent in ourself, the other 6 that a person is not born with are outside of her person. Unfortunately, this subtle arrangement inside the self but outside the person has given rise to the widespread belief that the deities are outside of our being. To invoke a deity, then, is to call a personality complex out of its latent state within the self and actualize it as a temporary substitute to our natal personality. The fact that the non-natal personality complex that is needed to solve the problem must be called out of its latent state within the self underscores the premise of the first stage of meditation. We cannot benefit from the infinite potential of the indwelling intelligence if we do not identify with it as our true self, which transcends all personality qualities. We cannot call out behavior from our personalities that are not intrinsic to them. Calmness cannot come out of fire. Zealousness cannot come out of earth or water, etc. Thus, to the degree that we can identify with Asar, we can manifest personality qualities that are not natal to us. We find many chapters of transformations, Keperu, in the Pert Em Heru, Egyptian Book of the Dead, in which the initiate, deceased, who has realized himself as Asar, is thus able to transform himself into a hawk of gold, Heru, Ptah, a phoenix, a lotus, Temu, Sobek, etc. We read in plate 27, quote, said Asar, the scribe Ani, justified in peace, I came into being from the unformed matter. I came into existence as Teper, the principle of transformation. I unfolded into plants. I am hidden in the tortoise. I am the Te, atoms or essence, of everyday deity. I am yesterday as the 4 and the Uraeus of the 7 which came into existence in the East. End quote. Note that the initiate, the scribe Ani, is addressed as Asar, showing that he has achieved this level of being. Footnote. Although the papyrus was prepared for the deceased scribe Ani, the very nature of the material and the spiritual tradition of Egypt leave us to conclude that the lofty spiritual teachings in the Pert Em Heru reflected the teachings of the initiates into the mysteries. End of footnote. Unlike Western scholars who claim that man evolves from apes, the Khemetic sages taught that man came from the unformed matter, the pot. Note that his self, Asar, is the Te, the essence or atom of all the deities. The 4 of yesterday, correspond to the four fundamental transformations of the life force, the four elements underlying the seven personalities, of which the initiate says that he is their Uraeus. Another important concept to be comprehended deals with the manner in which changes in our behavior and life is achieved. An effect of anti-polytheism has been the substitution of abstract ideas for the deities, which we have seen are personality complexes. As a result, people will pray or meditate on getting courage or patience, etc., which are abstractions, instead of meditating on manifesting the entire personality complexes that govern these attributes. This takes us back to the Sesh Metu Neter. The spirit can only react to wholes, concrete thoughts, images, and sensations. While it cannot react to the abstract word evil, it can react to the image of something considered so, unless the former gives rise to the latter in the person's mind. In the same way, it cannot react to the fractional abstraction, courage, but it can react to the description, a concrete indication of a personality, a whole having courage as one of its qualities. Good creative writers know this well. To move their readers or affect their spirits, they know that they must show more than they tell. This is why the Christian tradition promotes the concrete image of the life and suffering of Jesus above the concepts regarding the Father in heaven. The truth is to be found in the fact that the Father in heaven is just too abstract to serve as a model for affecting the spirits of its followers. The process is better known in Africa, where it is well known that there are 7 distinct personality types, archetypes, which cannot be united into one synthetic archetype, as the Christians have tried to do with the Christ. Footnote: I say the Christ and not Jesus because the Nazarene from Galilee has been turning in his grave for the past 2,000 years over what Paul has done with his Jewish messianic movement. End of footnote. Each deity is the archetype or perfect exemplar for a specific personality type. Heru and Kemet and Shango, Jakuta, with the Yorubas, is the archetype of mature manhood, fatherhood, male leadership and kingship. Orset and Kemet, Yamaya, with the Yorubas, is the archetype of mature womanhood, motherhood, female leadership and queen mothership. Herukuti and Kemet, Ogun, with the Yorubas, is the archetype of the enterprising, pioneering, defensive, and aggressive personality type, and so on. So rather than meditate on the fractional abstraction, courage, for example, we bring out of latency the full personality complex, a whole of either Heru or Herukuti. The process is exactly as that encountered in the practice of homeopathic or Chinese medicine. We don't prescribe medicines for fractions such as suppressed menses or fever. We consider the entire complex of symptoms, and if needed, all of the personality traits of the patient, and search for a remedy which addresses the entire complex. For example, what will truly cure, just not palliate, the suppressed menses of a fiery woman? Will not only fail to help a similar disorder in mild women, but may even aggravate the condition. Nefert Ra will therefore meditate on manifesting Het Heru, as opposed to the fractional abstraction of becoming a calm person, or on visualizations of her womb healing, etc. She will chant a heka of Het Heru, Ong Tang, such a Het Hurt, see chapter 24. Once she is in trance, she will see herself wearing the crown of Het Heru, dressed in yellow and green to enhance the required mood. Footnote: symbolizing that she has succeeded in acquiring the qualities of the deity. End of footnote. Visualizing herself thus, she will recall those recurring situations in which she tends to function in a fiery manner, but seeing herself functioning in a sweet, yielding, and mild manner. She will support this meditation by indulging in lively music, keeping herself entertained, surrounding herself with beautiful things and other correspondences to the deity Het Heru. As she works more and more with the Heka, word of power or mantra, and its energies flow into energize the imagery of the meditation, Nefertra will find a growing motivation to function as ritualized. Once she begins to manifest the desired behavior, which will be established at the end of the fourth stage of the meditation process, the avoidance of fiery behavior and the expression of sweetness in the face of confrontation will result in a lowered metabolic rate, which is conducive to the healing of the ovaries, increase in body fat, etc. Since Sihu was told that Mot would help him achieve his goal, he will enter into trance with the Heka of Mot, Ong Shring. Crowned with the Mot's feather, he will see himself giving some of his time and skills to his community. The bringing of balance into his life will be symbolized by the visualization of himself holding a scale with his heart in one pan and Mot's feather in the other. It symbolizes the balance between all complementary elements, in this case, the needs of the person and those of the group. In the chapter on initiation, it was said that this stage also corresponds to the intensification of the life force. Let's recall the observation that our emotions are the psychic driving force of the spirit. Nothing that is willed can be realized if there is no emotive force behind it. A mistake that most people make is to think of joy as an effect or reward for success, when it is the psychic motive force that is needed to succeed. This motive force can be cultivated by a practice known in the yogic tradition as Asvini Mudra. It consists in the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the perineal muscle. This is the smaller annular muscle that is contracted in order to stop the urine in midstream. It is also the muscle that goes into spasms at the moment of sexual arousal and orgasm. The practice of Asvini Mudra, as well as Mula Bandha, throughout the meditation, at this stage generates a feeling of sexual arousal, which the spirit, unlike the rational part of our being, does not distinguish as sexual excitement. To the spirit, this pleasure is associated with the contents of the mind during trance. As far as the spirit is concerned, Sihu is experiencing pleasure from sharing, and Nefartra is enjoying being sweet in the face of confrontation. And as we have shown earlier, the sharing and the sweet behavior carried out in the entranced imagination are as real to the spirit as the physical undertaking of the actions. It is important to realize that the method given here for conducting this stage of the meditation process is a mere adaptation of the actual practice, which consists of a full-blown ritual involving trance induction through chanting, drumming, dancing, and the use of many other techniques. Summary. Nomenclature. It is important to pay particular attention to the special manner in which the words person, individual, and self are being used in this book. While they are generally used synonymously, the etymology shows that they are fundamentally different in meaning. Person is compounded of per, or through, sun, or sound. We have seen that the various personalities are expressions of the deities, words of power, sounds, working through the lower part of the spirit. At times, for the sake of communication, I will sometimes use lower self for person. It corresponds to our being at the 9th and 10th sphere levels. Self is a term applied to the concept of identity. It is thus reserved in this book for the higher part of being. This will be understood by the capitalization of the term as self, or by the construction true or higher self. It corresponds to our being at the first sphere level and 0. Individual is compounded of indivisible plus dual. It is obvious that this word, like person, is not the kind of word that accidentally comes into being at the fish market or the barbershop. It is created by men working on a subject with the precision and discipline that is demanded by chemistry and mathematics. Individual thus denotes the indivisible duality between the higher and lower parts of our being, the self and the person. It corresponds to being at the 6th sphere, the point of supreme equilibrium on the tree. End of chapter 13. Please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Metu Neter, Volume 1 by Nefer. Chapter 14, Level 2, Second 3 stages of the meditation process. The procedure of separating the meditation process into stages is a strategy that is dictated by the behavior of our life force, Ra or Kundalini. While on one hand, its arousal is essential to the realization of the meditation objective, on the other hand, its arousal also vitalizes the conditionings and beliefs that are opposed to the meditation goal. For example, when a person meditates to give up smoking, the arousal of the life force to realize this objective will also vitalize the habit of smoking. It is clear then that something must be done as a safeguard before arousing the life force. This is the objective of the first 2 stages of the meditation process. A non-arousal of the life force mode of meditation, mediumistic trance, is used during the first 2 stages to impress upon the spirit the goal of the meditation. Once this has been established, a life force intensifying mode of meditation is used in the 3rd stage to vitalize the objective. If an antagonistic conditioning to the objective or the virtues that must be cultivated to achieve it exist in the spirit, it will also be vitalized. This will result in a crisis, or several of them, in which we must choose between the new objective or the new virtues on one hand, and on the other, the old habits. These crises are called, in the spiritual tradition, crossroad situations. This is the theme governing the 2nd level of the meditation process. Level 2 of the meditation process, Stage 4, Sphere 6. This stage corresponds to a set of meditations revolving around man's will. It was said earlier that for an indication of an expected accomplishment to be considered an act of the will, it must be free of emotional or sensuous influence. Otherwise, it is a desire. Since all personalities are indissolubly tied in with emotions, only those expectations arising from an identification with the indwelling intelligence can be considered willed events. There can be no such thing as a free will where the individual's choices are dictated by emotional or sensuous compulsion. It is important to note that the failure to distinguish between willing and desiring is a major cause of the failure to grow spiritually, for we fail to transcend our emotionality when we avoid an emotional act because of another emotion. This is the reason for Heru's initial failure to defeat Set. We must also recall that the true purpose of our will is not for choosing the path of our destiny, which is determined in the spiritual realm before incarnation. This is why competent astrologers can read a person's destiny from their charts. In most traditional African societies, it is a common practice for the character and destiny of an individual to be revealed by diviners shortly after birth. The goddess of destiny, for example, accompanies Tehuti when he makes his appearance at the individual's birth. This can be viewed from another perspective. Every person's destiny is under the control and direction of the indwelling intelligence. The true purpose of the will is to ensure that the thoughts, feelings, and actions that we undertake are in harmony with the plan of our indwelling intelligence. All truly successful people who have not been guided by diviners manage to intuitively or instinctively discover their career or destiny objective as determined by their true self. Unfortunately, they are in the minority. Most people must discover their earthly mission from their indwelling intelligence through the use of oracles or in-depth meditation. In most cases, the effort to live according to the dictates of the self, which are based on divine law, brings us into opposition with the emotionally dominated personality.
These crises, which are intensified by life force arousal procedures, are symbolized in the Osirian Metaphorian by the battle between Heru and Set. And in other traditions, they are the quote-unquote crossroads, which are the chief places for conducting rituals and making offerings to God. These spiritual crises are the most important events in our spiritual development. They are the only events that mark our spiritual growth. It is of utmost importance to understand that spiritual growth does not take place from the studying of scriptures, spiritual literature, doing rituals, meditating, deity or ancestor possession, etc. These are merely means of preparing you to live truth at the crossroad. Unfortunately, about 97% of students of spirituality do not know this truth. They pick and choose when and where they will observe a spiritual teaching, oblivious to the fact that spirituality is the living of truth. Each and every time that one finds oneself in a situation of having to choose between the laws of the higher parts of being against our feelings and opinions regarding the situation. Crossroad situations have very marked characteristics. On the side of the lower part of being, we experience strong emotions and rationalizations to the effect that we will suffer irreparable harm if we give in to the truth or ignore the emotions. A person who is endeavoring to transcend selfishness will find himself in a critical situation, not of his choosing, in which he is called upon by the circumstances to share with his worst enemy or to be nice with a most obnoxious person who has humiliated him and so on. It is then that Sebek, his faculty of rationalization, will provide him with very clever yet transparent excuses for not living truth. A careful and objective examination of these rationalizations will reveal that they are made up of all sorts of half-truths and out double talk or forked tongue. Good examples can be found in the arguments given by the American government for subsidizing tobacco growers while banning tobacco ads from their airwaves. It is only when we transcend the dominance that our emotional and sensual vehicle exerts upon us that spiritual growth takes place. This is easier said than done, as we all very well know from the trouble that most people encounter in dealing with their bad habits and emotions. Yet, with the proper meditation and spiritual education, it is much easier than is generally believed. Men abem ak emat, keeping the heart stable to live truth. The meditation technique for transcending the emotions was called Men abem ak emat in the Khemetic tradition, or keeping the heart stable to live truth, and Satipatthana, right or stable-mindedness, in esoteric Buddhism. Contrary to popular opinion, the way to successfully deal with emotions is not by quote-unquote controlling them, but by ignoring them. This is the essence, not only for establishing the dominion of the will, but as we will later see, for the experiencing of ourself as the indwelling intelligence. What would happen if you did not obey an emotion or sensual craving? Nothing. This thought seems not to have occurred to most people, who believe that they must follow their feelings and that their feelings are the validators of their will and their actions, i.e. that unless they have a feeling for doing something, they cannot do it, or that the action is not genuine and so forth. Most people succumb to this delusion, even though they have already overcome a habit, smoking, alcohol, meat eating, etc., that should have taught them once and for all the truth. The day you made up your mind to give up a habit, the craving did not stop. You succeeded by ignoring the craving and following your knowledge of the facts, even though the latter lacked power to generate feelings of pleasure. In fact, the pleasure was with the habit you were seeking to transcend. Essentially, the Men-Ab meditation process is a practice of ignoring the thoughts, sensations, and emotions that motivate you to think, give attention to feelings, and act in opposition to what the truth of the situation demands. A person, for example, experiences emotions that pressure him to withdraw and to dwell on feelings and thoughts of insecurity and inferiority whenever his wife declines to become intimate, whether she is justified or not. The Men-Ab meditation will consist of 1. Ignoring such thoughts and making every effort to act in a contrary manner, and 2. As you will most likely be visited by a. Thoughts of guilt and recrimination for harboring the negative thoughts and feelings, you must also ignore this set of thoughts and emotions as well. You may also experience a sense of anguish manifesting as an intolerance of the sensations of oppression associated with the emotion of guilt. Rather than allowing yourself to get caught up in hoping to be free of these sensations and doing things to expedite the deliverance from them, you must learn to accept their presence. In time, the emotions will cease to visit you, as long as you persevere in the above meditation procedure. Incidentally, it must be noted that this meditation technique is practiced not sitting in a quiet place, but in the thick of our everyday life experiences. It aims at giving us expertise in the management of our thoughts, emotions, and states of consciousness. The governing principle of Men-Ab is that there is never a reason for an emotional reaction. In other words, the tie between an emotion and what prompts it is not a rational one. It is based on the law of association, which was well explained by the Russian psychologist Pavlov. He would ring a bell each time he fed his dogs. Eventually, the ringing of the bell would by itself elicit the salivation and flow of digestive juices, as if the food had also been presented to the dogs. The spirit could not tell the difference between the bell and the food. All of our emotional and sensual responses are based on this non-rational associative mechanism. As man's spirit is originally and essentially free of emotional conditioned reflexes, all emotions are superimpositions on her true nature. Must you become angry in order to defend yourself? Have not thousands of years of Oriental martial arts practice proven that the calmer the warrior, the better his performance? Are animal faces, screaming, tensing of the body, and shouting obscenities necessary for expressing one's dissatisfaction? Don't they reduce the clarity of our communication of displeasure? What about suppression? Some people may ask. They may argue that the Men-Ab technique involves suppression of the emotions and sensual needs and may therefore be harmful. It is best to, quote, let it out, some will argue, ignoring the catastrophic results in many cases, murders, broken marriages, high blood pressure, etc. We must return once more to the truth concerning the original and essential nature of man's spirit. It is free of all emotional and sensual conditioning. This is what enables us to remove the pain condition reflex through suggestions given in trance to allow surgical procedures to be done without anesthetics. The pain mechanism is a protective condition, hence a conditioned reflex, imposed upon the organism due to the slowness and corruptibility of the voluntary thought mechanism. If the removal of a part of our physical organism from a harmful source depended on our thinking, we would be in a great deal of trouble. Most people freeze up in threatening situations, etc. Thus, the indwelling intelligence has programmed or conditioned the spirit to react automatically to threatening situations. When, however, we know that we must subject the organism to pain, as with surgery, parturition, or labor, etc., we can remove the superimposed pain reflexes. This fight-or-flight mechanism is very primitive. It has its centers in the portion of our brain which is dominant in the life of animals and influences us to animalistic behavior. failing to distinguish between real, imagined, and interpreted threats, it automatically prepares us to fight or flee whenever we believe that we are threatened. If we keep our minds on the fact that the successes experienced by people in overcoming their habits, smoking, alcoholism, etc., was due to the fact that the cravings and emotional drives to indulge eventually disappeared as a result of their being consistently ignored, then there was no suppression at work. In fact, the avoidance of the possibility of suppression is the aim of the second practice of the Men-Ab meditation system. Let's return to our gentleman above who is visited by emotions pressuring him to withdraw and indulge thoughts of insecurity whenever his wife says to him, "No, honey, not tonight. I don't feel like it." He has read up to the last paragraph and tells the author, "Okay, I am with you. I realize that my spirit is originally and essentially unconditioned. Therefore, these emotions are not who I am. I have been ignoring the pressure to withdraw and to dwell on thoughts of self-worthlessness, etc. But the fact is that even though I make the effort to interact in a normal way with my wife at such moments, I nevertheless feel terrible. The feelings and the thoughts are still there in the background. I really want them to go away." We can all identify with our gentleman friend. Again, the answer is the same. Ignore this second set of thoughts and emotions for the simple fact that our spirit is essentially and originally free of emotional conditionings, and the aim of spiritual development is the removal of the emotional superimpositions on the spirit. In other words, armed with the knowledge that our true nature is lacking in intrinsic emotional programs, we make the effort to ignore the conditioned reflexes pressuring us to accept the thought that we cannot stand the sensations accompanying our emotions. Ignoring these thoughts is not merely our inattention to them. We must not seek ways to rid ourselves of the feeling, nor indulge thoughts to the effect of wishing that the feeling would soon go away. Quote, "I will be glad when I stop feeling this way," etc. Nor indulge the thoughts that we are unvirtuous, immature, or unspiritual for having such emotions. We must remember that all emotions and sensual cravings are expressions of the lower part of our being, the person, and not ourself, the indwelling intelligence. Identification with our self-asura involves non-identification with our emotions. It is interesting to note that while Western man identifies his emotions as the expressions of his self, in the Khemetic tradition, they are identified with the animal part of our being. The latter is kept uppermost in the understanding of the people through the widespread symbolism of human nature as animal-headed people or human-headed animals, e.g. the deities Heru, Set, Anpu, etc. This allows us to keep our emotions in their proper place instead of elevating them and thus giving them power over our lives as Westerners have done. What are emotions anyhow? In all the behaviors so labeled, we will discover that they involve a response in which we become tense, especially in our breathing, which gets restrained and focused in the upper chest region at the point beneath the sternum. Because of this, our breathing is shallow, less than 500 milliliters, and irregular. Stuck in this tense, shallow, and irregular breathing state, we are thrown into a negative trance with the belief that 1. Some external situation or agent is the cause of our sensation. We give it a meaningless label, anger or shyness or fear, etc. And that 2. We must follow the behavior suggested by the thought component of our emotion. As emotions occur at the junction of the 9th and 10th spheres, the trance that is experienced is of the mediumistic modality, which means that the will becomes inactive. A characteristic of the mediumistic trance is that the contents of the sphere of awareness are accepted as reality. This is how emotions exert their power over people's lives. This insight into emotions, that they are mediumistic trances, accompanied with tense abnormal breathing, painful as well as pleasurable, gives us the clue for disarming their power to compel us. 1. Do not dwell on the thoughts that accompany them. 2. Focus your attention on each spot where you feel tense and will your body to relax itself. 3. Regulate and harmonize your breathing by making it deep, slow, and rhythmic. And 4. If applicable, do just the opposite of what the thought accompanying the feeling was suggesting. Make a strong effort to carry out the last instruction. When a powerful emotion threatens to overwhelm us, at step number 3, we can zap it by forcibly pulling the lower abdomen in and up. Lift the upper chest and hold it as you breathe out. Make sure that the lower abdomen is the only place in the body where tension is felt. This cannot be overstated. Follow this out breath by expanding the lower abdomen as you breathe in. At the end of the in-breath, tense the lower abdomen and hold the breath. Repeat the cycle, starting with the forcible contraction as shown above. Do this for as long as is needed to diffuse the emotion. It should not require any repetitions. Its effectiveness is due to the fact that the forcible contraction of the lower abdomen applies pressure on the pneumogastric nerve, which stabilizes the activity of the heart and sends a reflex stimulus to the waking center of the brain, the R complex, and the cerebral cortex. This manipulation of the nervous system serves to awaken the person from the mediumistic trance of emotion, as it is the basis for inducing waking trance. Footnote: this is the great Mahabdanda that male hatha yogis use to forestall on orgasm in order to arouse the kundalini during tantric rituals. Authors of hatha yoga manuals have removed it from its proper context and teach it as a mere pranayama technique. End of footnote. Another important goal of the Men-Ab meditation system is the sharpening of mindfulness. How many times haven't you said to yourself that you will not indulge a particular habit, only to find yourself knee-deep in the act before you remembered your pledge? A simple yet very effective technique consists in taking away something that you like very much from yourself for each infraction. Another extremely useful exercise that is a must consists in going for several days without laughing or smiling. Because these emotions are so powerful, the ability to ignore them gives the individual a great deal of skill in handling the negative ones. Beyond the issue of emotional transcendence, the practice of ignoring our emotions strengthens our awareness of the duality of our nature. Through the Men-Ab meditation, we have repeated experiences of the fact that on one hand, there is a part of our being saying, quote, I will not allow my body to follow the impulses to laugh, cry, while there is another part that is generating these impulses independent of our will and consciousness. This is the objective reality behind the term individual or indivisible duality. Pert M. Heru. It was noticed at the beginning of this chapter that the first 3 stages of meditation employ the mediumistic trance technique. It is based on putting the will in the left hemisphere of the brain, our syllogistic and analytical information processor, to sleep. Although this enables the implantation into the spirit of suggestions for changes in behavior, because there can be no opposition from the slumbering, segregative, and analytical thinking dominated will, the absence of these faculties makes it impossible for us to consolidate our knowledge. We have seen that the latter cannot be attained in the quote-unquote normal waking state, as full wakefulness and concentration is not achieved in this state. To attain full wakefulness, upon which insight and the efficient use of the will depends, we must triple our oxygen intake and reduce the flow of the life force to the voluntary organs, senses, legs, arms, etc. of the body. The increased supply of oxygen gives us a degree of internal wakefulness far exceeding that of the normal waking state. This is why the waking trance was called Pert em Heru, or becoming awake, or coming by day by the Commission. Besides giving us the insight and clarity of perception to transcend the host of false beliefs clouding our understanding, this mode of trance also provides the force and vitality needed for the successful carrying out of our need. This is especially needed at the crossroads situation spoken of earlier. It is then that our 8th and 10th spheres overwhelm us with the fear of losses and harms that we will incur if we live according to divine truth. The successful practice of the meditation process and the waking trance are the foundations of the following meditation stages. The meditation at this stage involves going into trance with the Heka Ong Ring. As we go into trance, visualizing ourselves as Heru, resisting or destroying the animals that symbolize our emotions. Level 2 of the meditation process, Stage 5, Sphere 5. In this stage, we use all of the techniques developed in the preceding stage, meditation and waking trance, to establish our sense of justice. The ability to give justice depends on our skill in ignoring fear and anger, i.e., it depends on a skillful and vitalized will. An analysis of all acts of injustice will reveal an underlying fear or anger at work. Thus, we see once more how important is the return of our identity to our true self, which is essentially free of emotional and sensual conditionings. It must also be noted that to the degree that we can give justice to others, to that degree will we receive spiritual protection from the injustices of others. The meditation at this stage involves going into waking trance with the Heka Ong Ring, while visualizing ourselves as the deity Herukuti in the act of destroying the animals symbolizing our fear or anger. The objective is to rise above the temptations, to achieve our goals through transgressions against others, or having observed this law, to succeed against the injustices of others. Level 2 of the meditation process, Stage 6, Sphere 4. While the preceding stage corresponds to our ability to detach ourselves from our person by sacrificing our personal interest for the sake of being just to others, this stage demands an even greater act of detachment. We are here called upon to rise above our egotism by sharing with others. It is not uncommon at this stage to find ourselves as a result of rituals and meditations at a crossroad in which the circumstances make a clear and inarguable argument for us to share with our enemies. In fact, this is the highest test of our ability to truly love, i.e., to give, not seeking anything in return, but to fulfill a genuine need. To be able to share, especially in such challenging situations, is not only a revelation of our transcendence of our persons and the understanding of our oneness, it also liberates a great deal of energy which is in turn used by the spirit toward the realization of the meditation objective. It is important to realize that beginning with the 4th stage of the meditation process, the detachment of the identification from the person begins to be established. The person, with its characteristic set of emotional and sensual patterns of behavior, is denied in order to assert the unconditioned self. At stage 5, sphere 5, the wedge is driven even further by our commitment to be fair with others, even if it means incurring great material losses. At this stage, the call to share with strangers and enemies alike drives our identity so far out of our person that we can almost begin to feel our true inner self. This budding experiencing of the indwelling intelligence takes on the form of a sense of joy and optimism that is independent of externals and success. In fact, as stated earlier, joy is the force that heals and brings success. Unfortunately, the majority of people reverses this relationship and make joy the result of being healthy and successful. The meditation at this stage, therefore, consists in going into trance with the Heka Ong Shireen, while visualizing yourself holding a scale in which your heart is in one pan, equally balanced by a feather in the other. See the Mat card in the section of the Oracle. The scale symbolizes the balance that must exist between all dualities in our lives. For example, between our personal and our self-interest, between our empirical information and our spiritual intuitions, our priori knowledge, between our left brain sequential verbal thinking and our graphic, spatial, and holistic thinking, and so on. A light heart, i.e., a heart that weighs no more than a feather, is a sophisticated symbol of the evidence of living truth. Mat equals truth. But what is truth? It is something to be attained through the reading of the scriptures, or through dialectical argumentation, according to Westerners. According to the African tradition, it can only be known through living. Man discovers truth by living according to the laws of his true nature. It is of interest to note that according to the Bible, man and God share the same qualities of being. This is a theme that is dropped as soon as it is stated. We read in Genesis 1:26, quote, "And God said, let us make man in our own likeness," end quote. It does not take much to realize that the likeness of God in which man is made cannot refer to man's physical image or to the set of personality qualities, habitual fears, likes, dislikes, etc. Man, the likeness of God, must then be a formless, incorporeal, immaterial, spiritually unconditioned being. That is why it is said, "Make not graven images of God thy Lord." The absence of emotional pressure from the immaterial, incorporeal, and unconditioned self is symbolized by the weight of the heart, the will, equaling that of a feather, i.e., if there is a force motivating our actions, then we are not exerting our will, but our desire. We can illustrate this readily. Your doctor has placed you on a diet. On one hand, you have a strong emotional and sensual pressure to indulge in a prohibited article of diet, and on the other, the cold, non-emotional truth embodied in your prescription. If you follow your desire and eat the prohibited food, it can be metaphorized that your heart, or will, has been overpowered by a forceful, heavy cause. If instead you follow the truth, which does not elicit any pressure, which in fact is strongly opposed by your weakness for the banned item, it can be metaphorized that your heart or will has been influenced by a forceless cause, symbolized by the feather of Mat. The importance of this concept cannot be overstated, as the majority of people believes that unless an idea has emotional or sensual force behind it, it should not or cannot be carried out. But the crux of living truth is just the opposite. It matters not how unemotional or unpleased you are about the truth. If it is true, you can and must live by it. The absence of emotional and sensual support for an idea simply means that our spirit has not yet been conditioned or programmed to generate such energies for it. Living an idea with an appreciation for the good it can do will in time lead to the generation of enjoyment for it. Last but not least, the symbolism contained in the heart's weight equaling that of a feather refers to the will being under the influence of the immaterial, hence weightless and unconditioned self, as opposed to the very material, hence heavy and conditioned person. It symbolizes then that the individual has succeeded in establishing his identity with the indwelling entity. He is Ma Keru, as this entity is the individual's share in God's essence. His established identification with it qualifies him to pass on to the highest three spheres of the tree of life, representing the divine faculties of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, which man shares qualitatively, i.e., not in magnitude, with the Supreme Being. Had his heart weighed more than a feather, we would then have evidence that his actions were motivated by the emotional or animal part of the spirit. In the Khemetic metaphorian of the weighing of the heart, this failure is followed by the devouring of the heart by the beast, Al-Malmam, which is part crocodile, hippopotamus, and lion. It is a symbol of the destructiveness of our emotions. End of Chapter 14, Metu Neter, Volume 1, by Ra'un Amen Nefer. Please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Metu Neter, Volume 1, by Ra'un Amen Nefer. Chapter 15, Levels 3 and 4 of the meditation process, the last 4 stages. The successful return of the identity from the person to the indwelling intelligence, symbolized in the passing of the weighing of the heart test, enables consciousness to rise to the divine parts of the spirit. From another perspective, it can be said that the ability to ignore the behavioral suggestions and compulsions from the lower part of the being, the person has enabled the individual to achieve the ability to fully concentrate on a thought at the exclusion of all others, or to fully ignore all thoughts and sensory stimuli. The ability to concentrate on one thought for as long as required is the essential requirement for the work to be done in the 7th and 8th stages, spheres 3 and 2, and the ability to ignore all thoughts is the essence of the work of the last 2 stages of meditation. Level 3 of the meditation process, Stage 7, Sphere 3. The 3rd sphere is the seat of the creative units of spiritual power that are responsible for all of the manifestations in the mental and physical realms. These are the 50 gates of Bina, through which all life forms come into and leave the world. They are the 50 matrikas, or matrices, of the great goddess Kundalini, that function as the seeds, or baya, or units composing the host of Heko, words of power. The ability to successfully use these Heko to affect the course of events depends, as stated above, on the ability to exclusively focus our attention on the chanting and associated graphic symbol. This ability can only be developed by the practice of Men'ab, in which we must ignore the pressures of our emotions and conditioned beliefs or opinions. It is important to realize that we cannot concentrate for as long as we want at a sit-down meditation if we haven't broken the habit of following up the thoughts and emotions that reflects themselves into our awareness in response to the day-to-day challenges. The bottom line is habit. We must establish the habit of ignoring our mental activities at will. We must further realize, as you will eventually discover, that the realization of this objective is not simply based on the will to ignore our mental and emotional activities. It must be underlaid by genuine detachment from the interest of the lower part of being the person. In other words, we must die to, transcend the pressures and pleasures that earthly things have upon the person part of our being. This is not to say that joy or enjoyment in life will cease. We must remember and realize that joy is no longer to be considered the engine that propels us in this life. The way of life that we are to embark on at this stage is one in which we do something because it is the truth, and let the joy for it follow from the appreciation of the good that it does. This is what is meant, but distorted, when Jesus told Satan, or Set, the emotional body, to get behind him. It is interesting to note that the deity governing this stage, Seker, Kali, etc., rules over the dead and death. Turning our backs on the emotionally and sensually energized way of life requires for us to discipline ourselves. But this discipline is not merely for the sake of discipline, but for the sake of coordinating our activities with the laws governing the forces, the Hekal, in charge of carrying out events in our lives. As each force, for the sake of order, is assigned a place in time and space, the individual must at this stage live in harmony with the cycles governing the functions of his spirit. It is well known that the ancient black civilizations knew about and paid strict attention to the intrinsic time for performing all activities. For example, the stomach's natural schedule to secrete digestive acids peaks at around midday and hits rock bottom at midnight. Along with it runs the cycle for secreting the mucus that coats the stomach to protect it against this acid. When you eat a major meal past midday, especially at night, it causes the stomach to secrete acid in excess of the required amount of mucus to protect the lining of the stomach. Along with other factors, this can create or aggravate an ulcer, and definitely contribute to a host of digestive problems and malassimilation. Beyond the indigestion, all sorts of disorders will reflex themselves to distant but related parts of the body. You may suffer headaches, insomnia, emotional upsets, etc. Similarly, while the time unconditioned voluntary yang part of your body will respond to your will to exercise heavily at any time of the day, the time conditioned involuntary portion, yin, which provides the vital support, supplies blood, clears waste, etc., is only predisposed to handle such activities between sunrise and midday. During this period of the day, the sympathetic division of the nervous system, which is in charge of sending blood to the external organs of the body, arms, legs, etc., is on the rise, and the body's supply of glycogen, or sugar stored in the muscle and liver, is still available. Exercising during the evening, while convenient because of the economic industrial mold controlling our lives, harms the body, not only because of the lack of internal vital support, but because it also infringes upon other functions that are naturally scheduled to take place then. It will cut into and interfere with the time allotted to the evening functions of the parasympathetic, assimilation, repair, regeneration, etc. Then you wonder why, in spite of all of your exercising, good wholesome natural diet and wondrous herbal supplements, your health still breaks down, and you are still beset with spiritual and emotional problems. A list of hundreds of facts supporting the rhythmic and time-conditioned flow of bodily functions can be given. It is enough to note a few. Independent of our activities, our temperature, pulse, and breathing rates do not remain even throughout the day. They rise with the sunrise, peak at midday, drop below their mean at sunset, and bottom out at midnight. It is well known to Western scientists that all of our activities, physical labor, mental labor, left brain thinking, right brain thinking, eating, sleeping, etc., have their best and worst times of the day, which times are inherently related to the forces governing the rise and fall in temperature, pulse, and the diurnal or circadian course of the sun. Incidentally, because the people of the ancient black civilizations synchronized the events in their lives with these cycles, ignorant Westerners accused them of worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are in reality means of keeping track of a variety of cycles. They were meditated upon, not worshipped, with the aim of understanding how to harmonize the day-to-day activities of our lives with the cycles they represent. Living in accordance to these cycles places limitations and disciplinary measures upon us. It is interesting to note that cycles, limitations, and discipline are all Saturnial keywords, and Saturn is the planetary correspondence to the third sphere. The objective of the first meditation at this stage is to go into trance with the Heka Ong Kring, while visualizing yourself as hawk-headed and holding the Uas scepter, a flail and a crook. The Uas scepter symbolizes the happiness and well-being resulting from due attention to the flail and the crook. On one level, the flail symbolizes the expansive, externalizing hot or yang portion of the cycle of manifestation, while the crook, the internalizing cool or yin side. Keeping them in balance leads to well-being and success. In addition, the flail symbolizes the harshness with which we must deal with ourselves for violating our pledges of discipline, while the crook corresponds to the gentle, meditative, and ritualistic methods to the same end. Success with them qualifies us for the roles of governing and ruling others. The second set of meditations involves the Heka and symbols of the deity governing the meditation objective, as indicated by the oracle. While Nefert Ra invoked Het Heru during the third stage, emphasizing her enjoyment of the objective sought, she saw herself enjoying the baby she wants to have. Here she will go into a trance with the Het Heru Heka, with the aim of becoming the deity for the sake of spiritual development. I.e., the interest here is not a personal one, as one has died to personal needs. Once one has succeeded in manifesting the deity at this level, one can generate its forces to assist others in need, or to serve as an earthly vehicle or avatar for the will of God. I.e., the Supreme Being will use your spirit for promoting its plan in the world. With differences regarding levels of spiritual development, the procedure here is similar to the ritual system of the afflicted, commonly practiced throughout Africa, and initiations into becoming a living shrine of a deity. In the ritual of the afflicted, once a person has succeeded in healing herself through the power of a particular deity, she must train to become a shrine of that deity so that she can serve as a healer to others. Hence, the invocation at this stage is to become a power or Shechem of the deity for the service of others, while the invocation at the third stage was for the sake of one's personal needs. Level 3 of the meditation process. Stage 8, Sphere 2. The two fundamental actions of the mind. Thinking versus thought drift. In our normal waking state, on one hand, thoughts are constantly streaming into our sphere of awareness, telling us what is and what is not, or suggesting what to do and what not to do. We call this thought drift, or unwilled thought activity. On the other hand, we are always employing our will to select and arrange these thoughts into meaningful units, or to veto or sanction the suggestions or impulses to act according to our innate sense of logic, conditioning, and acquired store of information. We call this thinking or will thought activity. Although it does not concern us at this point, it is important to note that most people fail to distinguish between the uncritical acceptance of thought drifts and the discriminating activity of will thought activity. Only the latter is thinking proper. Both modes have their problems. It is the uncritical acceptance of thought drifts in the normal waking state that we label irrational and illogical behavior. Will thought activity, on the other hand, is no better than the information that it takes as its premise. You know the old story. logical but not necessarily true. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how logical the reasoning is or how pragmatic the information. All items of information are no more than labels, definitions, and descriptions, that is, symbols of objective realities, and not the realities themselves. While they are 100% trustworthy for thinking about closed systems with non-variable components, making or fixing machines, electronic appliances, houses, etc., they have a delusory effect on thinking in situations in which the values of the components are subject to change as the relationship between them changes. As a result, the verbal and graphic symbols, which are the foundation of our thought activities because of their inherent finite nature, cannot cover all aspects of relational eventualities. These relational events are none other than the issues of living itself: economics, spirituality, theoretical sciences, philosophy, psychology, sociology, etc. For example, what or who is man? Is he a rational animal? Did he ascend from the apes or descend from God? If our thoughts fail to communicate to us the knowledge of reality in the higher realms of life, how then can we arrive at such knowledge? A very important clue can be found in the science of meditation, which has been touted as the means to acquiring wisdom. Meditation is a process of making the mind blank, we are told, and this is the goal that we have been seeking through the preceding 7 stages. To make the mind blank is to still the thought process. Thoughts that drift in must be ignored, and the habitual impulse to exert the will in directing thought activity must also be ignored. This leaves us in a state in which we are disinterested spectators to the parade of thoughts, feelings, and physical perceptions streaming into the sphere of awareness. Kept up long enough, we arrive at a point where the thought drift process comes to a halt. If we had been ignoring all thoughts save one, we transcend it and gain full insight into the objective reality that it represents. And if we were ignoring all thoughts, then we would arrive at a point in which all that consciousness could be conscious of is of being conscious. The former is wisdom, and the latter is experience of the self, the indwelling source of consciousness and intelligence. The meditation at this stage involves going into trance with the heka of Tehuti, Ong Hung Shring, while visualizing yourself as the deity, holding a pen to a blank sheet of paper but not writing. Keeping the eyes open and directed toward the center of the forehead at the level of the eyebrow will help to keep the attention focused on the meditation objective. This is called Tradikam. Before meditating, you will decide that your meditation objective is to come out of the state of thought-free waking trance with insight into a particular subject. In the same manner that people go to sleep with a problem and awaken with a solution without having gone through the logical sequential thought process of the quote-unquote normal waking state, we go into waking trance to still the thought process and come out of the trance with the answer. This is the process of enlightenment, or Kensho, as it is called in Zen, or Kut, as it is called in the Khemetic tradition. Sages and prophets use it to arrive at their knowledge of reality. It transcends studying, researching, thinking, reasoning, and all possible forms of using the mind. It is a tapping into the omniscience of the indwelling intelligence, our true self, which is our individuated share in the life of the Supreme Being. Incidentally, all messages from such oracles as the I Ching, Ife, and the Metu Neter, given in this book, proceed from this part of our spirit. They are the means of tapping into our indwelling omniscience in lieu of our inability to meet the demands of this stage of meditation, which, needless to say, will take a great deal of time, patience, and work. Proficiency in this stage of meditation makes the person a living oracle, otherwise known as a sage or a prophet. Level 3 of the meditation process, Stage 9, Sphere 1. In the preceding stage, all thoughts, save one, the image of Tehuti, or the object to be known, were ignored during the meditation process. When one comes out of the trance it induces, the expectation of having a revelation is often fulfilled. The meditation at this stage involves going into trance with the heka of Asar, Ang, Asar, Hung. There are no visualizations or expectations. The attention is focused at the area about an inch beneath the navel to follow the breathing. Tradakam is also employed. Eventually, all thoughts and awareness of the body, emotions, and the environment fall away, leaving our consciousness conscious of being conscious. This is the direct experience of our true inner self. The more we repeat the experience, the more we find ourselves effortlessly detached from the lower part of our being in our day-to-day experiences. In other words, we become the mummy asar, decayeless, immovable by emotions, etc. Level 4 of the meditation process, Stage 10. This is a subtle continuation of the preceding stage. When we attain to the realization of self at Stage 9, our consciousness of being conscious is characterized by a sense of being focused in the center of the consciousness experience. In this stage, the consciousness of being conscious is decentralized, ever expansive, boundless, and diffused. Thus, we realize Patanjali's definition of yoga, which is attained from the inhibition of the mental energy or matter. Then the seer is clothed in his essential nature. We have pushed our quest of self to its most hidden inner recess, which in the Khemetic tradition is called Amen and Nu. We have thus become Neb Er Tesher. Summary: the stages of initiation and meditation and social organization. At this point, it should already be clear, if it were not yet known, that the principles discussed from Chapter 7 to the present embody the fundamental requirements that individuals must meet in order to participate harmoniously in society. With varying degrees of spiritual understanding, the so-called puberty rites of African nations are based on the principles of Men-Ab. Becoming of age is not enough. To qualify for citizenship in a traditional African society, with its rights to marry, bear arms, to claim ownership of land, etc., the individual must achieve a certain degree of proficiency in the ability to ignore emotional pain, sensual temptation, physical deprivation, etc. He must learn to place the needs of the many above those of the one. He must appreciate the value of accumulated experience through a show of respect for elders and wise men. Regarding people's participation in the government of the traditional African nation, it is important to fully understand the peculiar governmental system developed in ancient Africa, the divine kingship. Central to the system is the concept that it is not the king who leads the people, but the supreme being. Even Western spiritualists who acknowledge that the true self of man is the supreme being have not been able to understand this point. The man, and all others, living and deceased, who will lead the people must be initiated into the ability to serve as a vehicle through which the supreme being and its agencies, the deities, will govern the people. All leaders must therefore be masters of divine law and priests of the shrines of the deities. I will quote from Life in Ancient Egypt by Adolf Ehrman, Dover Press, which will prove very enlightening. On the 14th of Paofi, In the 46th year of Ramses II, we find the members of the court consisted of Bechanonis, the first prophet of Ammon, Uesermont, the prophet of Ammon, Ram, the prophet of Ammon, the prophet Uanofre of the temple of Mut, the prophet Amen-Amen-An of the temple of Tans, Amenhotep of the temple of Ammon, Amenhotep, the priest and reader of Ammon, Eni, the priest and reader of Ammon, the priest of the temple of Ammon, the accountant Hui of the court of justice of the town. In this case, therefore, we find 9 priests and but 1 layman, i.e. the permanent scribe of the court, who reported the lawsuit. The author's phrase, in this case, compares this composition of the court to that of a latter time, Ramses IX, 20th dynasty, in which the court was predominantly made up of laymen. When we compare both periods, we find that the latter corresponds to the beginning of the end of the Khemetic civilization. A great deal of the administration of the kingdom had fallen into the hands of foreign soldiers who had been brought in as mercenaries to staff the standing army of the country. Yet, up to the beginning of the 19th dynasty, we find that the courts and the government of the nation are in the hands of priests or prophets. The reason for this will be deducted from the following quotation from the same book. The laws which guided the king and courts in their decisions are unfortunately unknown to us. Some of them were said to be of divine origin. A deed informs us that the criminal should be condemned to the great punishment of death, of which the gods say, "Do it to him." And it expressly states further that this decree of the gods is written in the writings of the divine words. Diodorus probably says truly that he was informed that the sacred books of law had been composed by Thoth, the god of wisdom. Here we have it, a book of the writings of divine words, i.e. the Metu Neter, which was written by Tahuti for the use of priests and prophets, and the king in their work of administering justice. Ehrman also states that during the Old Empire, which is the period that best represents Khemetic culture, all the judges belonged to one of the 6 great houses, that is, to one of the great law courts, in which the secret words were discussed. At the head of this court of justice stood the chief judge. He would be one of the high priests of the great gods, the second after the king in the court of the palace. At all ages of Egyptian history, this was the most popular position in the kingdom. The popular idea was that earthly governors and chief judges ought to vie in wisdom with their heavenly prototype. He, the chief of the judges, through the words of his mouth, caused brothers to return home in peace. The writings of Thoth were on his tongue, and he surpassed in righteousness the little of the balance. He knew the secrets of everyone. So what is this book of the writings of Tahuti, or Thoth, which enabled the chief judge to know the secrets of everyone, that contained the secret words that the judges convened to discuss? I verily say to you that it is the Metu Neter oracle that I have brought back to the world. Let those in high positions use it to govern, and the world will be restored to the state of peace and prosperity, known only in the days of Asar. Let those in low positions use it, and they will inherit the staff of the lion. End of chapter 15. Please support this channel by clicking on the links below.